Welcome to the Pentateuch and the Wisdom Literature. My name is Jin-Yang Kim. Before the introduction to the Pentateuch, let me explain the textbooks for the course. The Old Testament, a historical and literary introduction to the Hebrew Scriptures. This is a very attractive and readable introduction to the Old Testament. And as its subtitle indicates, it seeks to combine both a historical and literary approach to the material. One of the strengths of this book is the way in which Michael Coogan brings the Old Testament alive by setting it in its historical and the ancient Near Eastern context. The second book is Israel's Wisdom Literature, a liberation critical reading. In her reading of wisdom literature, Diane Burgant briefly surveys major scholarship on the historical and literary critical readings of wisdom books and contributes her own interested reading regarding the role of women, environmental issues, and issues of social justice. It provides an important aspect of thinking about issues of justice in the context of creation and emphasis central to wisdom teaching. Each chapter contains sections of reflection on contemporary issues beyond those raised in the previous section. The last book is Return to Babel, Global Perspectives on the Bible. The concept of this book is very clear. It takes a series of significant biblical passages and assigns them to a number of readers, students, or scholars of the Bible from a variety of cultural backgrounds, so that one has a Latin, African, and Asian response for each passage. The Pentateuch is the first part of the Old Testament and of the Hebrew Bible. It's called the instruction for life. Why? Because the word Torah derives from Hebrew Torah, which means instruction. In Greek, Pentateuch. The Pentateuch means 5 books, or more specifically, 5 scrolls. Philo of Alexandria mentioned the 5 books of Moses. Josephus also clearly mentioned the 5 books of Moses. The New Testament writers also mentioned the law of Moses. These witnesses confirmed that both Jewish and Christian tradition had established these are 5 fundamental books of Moses, the law. They are the work of Moses. How about the Hexateuch? What difference does it make when we speak of Hexateuch instead of the Pentateuch? Gerhard von Rad speaks of a Hexateuch. For von Rad, the core of the traditions concerning Israel's origins is to be found in Israel's small historical creed. For example, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, chapter 26, also in Joshua 24. Now this creed ends with the mention of the gift of the land. For this reason, von Rad concludes that one should not speak of a Pentateuch, but of a Hexateuch, because the tradition of Israel's history must end with the account of the conquest, which is found in the book of Joshua, and which is not found in the Pentateuch. How about the Tetrateuch? Von Rad's idea was challenged by one of his own students, by the name Martin Noth, in his famous work, A History of Pentateuchal Traditions. The term Tetrateuch, which is 4 books, originated with Noth's work because it excluded the book of Deuteronomy from the Pentateuch. His thesis is based on three observations. Number one, no Deuteronomistic texts are found in the first four books of the Bible. Number two, the sources of the Pentateuch do not figure in the book of Joshua. And number three, Deuteronomy is the preface to the Deuteronomistic history. So what's the Pentateuch? It contains the first five books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. When you say the Pentateuch, is it five books or one book or five chapters in one book? If you read it as one book and five chapters, then what's the plot of the book? Well, there is a major hiatus between the first book, which is the Genesis, and the four books that followed from Exodus through Deuteronomy. The first book narrates the origins of Israel, and the other books, the four other books, narrate the organization of the people under Moses' leadership. From a structural viewpoint, the end of Deuteronomy corresponds to the end of Genesis. Joseph's death marks the end of the patriarchal period, and Moses' death the conclusion of another period, that is, the end of Israel's wanderings in the wilderness and the formation of the people of Israel into God's people. Jacob's blessings in Genesis 49 correspond to the blessings of Moses in Deuteronomy 33. The introductions and conclusions of books of Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy emphasize the legislative character of these books, the figure of Moses, and the importance of Sinai, Moab, and the plains of Moab, Horeb, and the plains of Moab as a theological sites of the law. As you can see from the map, there is Mount Sinai in the wilderness, and another site is the plains of Moab. These two sites are very important for three books: Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So here is the Pentateuch. It is from the story of from the creation of the world to the establishment of ancient Israel. There are three codes in the Pentateuch: the covenant code, Exodus 21 through 23; the Deuteronomic code, Deuteronomy 12 through 26; the holiness code, Leviticus 17 through 26. So what's the crucial event in the five books? In other words, what's the turning point? Is there a moment when you feel that this is it in the Pentateuch? Or somebody will say that Exodus is that moment for me. If you say that the subject of the five books is the Exodus event, then you understand the theme of the five books is of search, deliverance. What's the alternative answer? Somebody will say that the event that Moses received the law from God at Mount Sinai is that moment for me. If you say that the subject of five books is the law of Moses, then you understand the theme of the five books is the law. So the law and the narrative. The Pentateuch is both the law and narrative. You can't think one without the other. They go together. I believe that the Pentateuch is a collection of a law and narrative that happened under God for the people and for the world. For this reason, I think The Pentateuch is an instruction for life. I would say if I want to emphasize the 5 books as Torah, as the commandment, and as the law, the central moment will be the Leviticus. Leviticus 19. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. If you see the Pentateuch, you will find the constant threat of worshipping other gods. If that is true, then the book of Deuteronomy among 5 books will be a climatic moment with the Shema, hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. That's another way to see the central theme of the Pentateuch. I like this drawing by the Lutheran pastor Daniel Elander. I like it because it represents the central theme of the Pentateuch, the love of God and love of neighbor. He says this wilderness is God's classroom, that we need to be taught how to live as free people or God's people. Then you love your neighbor and you love your God. So, who wrote the Pentateuch? Who is the author? Is it Moses or somebody else? Well, there is an account of Moses' death in Deuteronomy. It was unlikely that he has written those verses himself. I often find that students are resistant to the idea that the Bible is a cut and paste job. That is a combination of literary sources. I also don't think the Bible is a collection of all fragments and pieces. But the final form of the Pentateuch indicates that it has been edited by the final editor. It's clear that there are differences between the first creation story and the second creation story. Wellhausen articulated the documentary hypothesis. The Pentateuch, he argued, comprises 4 distinctive sources, labeled J, E, D, and P. Wellhausen used these sources to construct the development of religion of ancient Israel. So for the detailed discussion on this the documentary hypothesis, see the Coogan's page from 25 through 27. Because P was the final editor, the first chapter of the Pentateuch is P, and the last chapter is also largely P. P has thus framed the whole Pentateuch. So the Pentateuch is an especially rich theological work that describes God as creator, God as a savior, God as electing God, the God of covenant, God as the one who blesses, God as lawgiver, and God as relational. So what does it mean when you say God is creator? Let me give you an example. This is the first creation story from Genesis 1. Here, God divided water under and above, and God created dry land and filled trees. And also God created sun, moon, and the stars. And God created fish and the birds in the air, in the sky. And the last day God created humankind. So what I see here is a beautiful world, that God created this world to love us and to bless us. I hope that throughout the semester you will find the meaningful instruction for life from the Pentateuch. Thank you very much.